Hello everybody, I am Michael Spath of TheWolverine.com here at Frank's Diner on Maynard on Michigan's campus, home of the best French toast in Ann Arbor, in my opinion. And these guys are going to get first-hand account of that today. I'm joined by Helfand of the Michigan Daily, Nick Baumgardner of MLive.com, and Kyle Bogenschutz of Fox Sports Net. We're here to talk a little bit about Michigan football. Every Monday morning, 10 a.m., Frank's Diner, come on down. Have the best French toast in town. Guys, first thing, camp has ended, it's game week. What is the thing that, coming out of 3 weeks of camp, that you're kind of, people are talking about and that you're going to be looking for on Saturday?
For me, I guess I'll start, I think it's the offensive line. I think that's really the one thing we need to know. I mean, we have an idea, who's going to be put a gun to my head, it's probably Jack Miller, center, last with a guard. But I mean, really, how are they going to play? And I think to me, that's the biggest issue, the biggest concern. Last year, they had a lot of turnovers, whatever it was, but they never really found a consistent running game. And to me, it doesn't matter as much about the running back as it does. They need that interior of the offensive line better. Maybe new guys is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But that to me, I want to see how they perform. And I think we'll be able to find out even if it's against them.
I mean, obviously, I think everyone's going to be watching the offensive line, especially the interior. I'll flip the script. I'll say the defensive line because it seems like there's so many guys that they want to rotate in. We'll see. It seems like they're working guys even in the three techniques. See if Frank Clark slides in there in passing situations. Good things about Tom Strobel. I want to see how that rotation shakes out because it seems like they could play 8 to 10 guys feasibly on that defensive line. How do they all get in the mix? Tyler Charlton obviously is someone everyone wants to talk about because he's a freshman, but physically can he get in there? But that's something that I want to see how they can control the line of scrimmage.
Kyle, you mentioned Frank Clark with the three technique. I think when Jack Miller told, or I think it was Kyle Kalis actually, told us last week that Frank Clark was coming down and playing inside. If you're an offensive coordinator, how are you going to prepare for this defensive line? Because it seems like they could put 12 different guys out there at 12 different plays.
Well, and if they're going to get pressure up the middle, I mean, that's the way to do it. But when you have a guy as athletic as Frank Clark, that's going to make things extremely difficult, on an offensive coordinator, on an offensive line coach. You put a lot of pressure. And then you add a guy like Chris Wormley maybe on the edge who is really, I wouldn't say he's a pass rusher. He's more of a guy who you think would play inside. So if you flip Clark and Wormley, you're really trying to get pressure up the middle and trying to disrupt things, in the pocket and obviously the quarterback there. So that one, I mean, we'll see obviously, if it plays out on Saturday, but that would be really interesting to me. And again, Tom Strobel is someone who's not, I mean, he's more fit to be on the outside, but if he's playing on the inside, clearly they're trying to get a pass rush directly up the middle.
Zach, only one major injury in fall camp so far. Certainly, we all know that Jake Ryan is battling back, and Russell Bellamy's going to miss the season with his ACL injury. But Amar Darboh, they announced last week, foot injury, hasn't really explained what exactly the injury was, but he's going to be out for the year. How much is that going to impact Michigan, and who are you looking for to maybe replace him come Saturday?
Well, Darboh was really expected to have a breakout year this year. And so that's a big loss for Michigan on the outside, especially because we got guys like Gallen and Dillio who aren't as big. Not that Darboh is huge, but Gallen and Dillio are each under 6 foot. I think Gallen's 5'8" or something like that.
So who's your height?
About my height. Nothing wrong with that. For a wide receiver, maybe a little bit on the small side. So look to guys like Jaden Chesson, who was supposed to be battling with Darboh. It looked like Darboh pulled ahead of it, but they both came in the same class. Chesson was a guy that was pretty touted coming out of high school, like Chesson, like Darboh was. So guys like Chesson, I think they're going to rotate him in with Jeremy Jackson. And with Joe Reynolds, who each haven't been super productive in their time at Michigan, but they are experienced more so than Chesson, and I think they're going to look towards the rotation more than replacing him with just one guy.
Nick, you had an interesting column, I thought, about the Darboh injury, saying, do we really know what Michigan lost here? I mean, we could all sit here and speculate and say, well, they're going to be hurting without Amar Darboh, but he didn't have a catch last year. So should we really sit here and make it out to be something more than it is?
No, I mean, I think at some point you're guessing. You're just assuming that, from what they tell us, what we saw in the spring game, we don't see much. So you're assuming and you're guessing that he's going to be a guy who gets this done, but we don't know. So to panic like this was a Jake Ryan injury, for example, it's just, I mean, it's a worthless exercise because we just really don't know. I mean, he could have had an all-American season, or he could have had 2 catches. We don't know. So And we still don't know who's going to replace him. And that's why that, like Zach says, that's an interesting. We'll see what happens in a game situation.
Just to add, one of the residual effects is Devin Funch's role is definitely going to be increased. It was already going to be increased, I think, especially with the added weight and just his overall ability to do things in the red zone and all over the field. But that one is something that I would expect him to get a few more footballs. And I think it's a disappointing thing for me. You got 3 freshman wide receivers, but none of them are necessarily ready to come in and make a difference. Maybe like you'll see in the class of 2014, when maybe Drake Harris comes in and maybe he's ready to see the field. You don't have that, and I think that really hurts Michigan this year. Absolutely.
Well, guys, thanks a lot. We'll come back in the next segment and talk maybe about a surprise yesterday, 4 captains, and maybe who wasn't voted captain is the bigger surprise than who was voted captain. Welcome back to Frank's Diner. Again, I am Michael Spath of TheWolverine.com, here with Kyle Bogenschutz from Fox Sports Net, Nick Baumgardner from MLive.com, and Zach Helfand from the Michigan Daily. Yesterday, Michigan announced captains, and Nick and I had a little disagreement on Twitter. 4 captains for the 4th time. Michigan doesn't quite acknowledge James Whitley being on that, being a captain.
He's off the wall.
Yeah, he's not on the wall, but he was voted captain by his teammates in 2000. So the 4th time in the history of Michigan football that they've had 4 captains. Courtney Avery, probably not a huge surprise. He seems like a guy that they really respect. Cam Gordon might have been a little bit of surprise. Taylor Lewan, no surprise there. And Jake Ryan, redshirt junior. Redshirt juniors are eligible because they're senior class. Was there a surprise for any of you guys?
I guess maybe that Devin Gardner wasn't a captain, right? I mean, I guess that's the only real surprise that he was left off. I think Cam Gordon, like Mike said, was probably a bit of a surprise, and good for him. He seems like he's had a really good camp. From the videos we've seen, he's been all over the field. So good for him to kind of have this, cherry on top at the end of his senior year. But no Devin is a bit of a surprise. You got 4 captains, and he's not in there. And he's, like Mike said, he's eligible. So what happened there? I mean, is it a big deal? Probably not. He's still going to lead, but I think it's a surprise.
I mean, it's just odd. Everything you heard after the offseason, it seemed like he really stepped up as a leader. I guess Cam Gordon, maybe that something can be said for a guy who's been through a lot in his career, as far as switching positions, the coaching change, not really having, kind of being on an island and not really having a role on the team. And now, he really is going to have a significant role, at least, until Jake Ryan comes back. But for me, it would be, Jake Ryan and Thomas Gordon, to me, were interchangeable. I just didn't see, we're not in the locker room, but they're both kind of lead by example guys. They don't seem to say too much. So I thought that one could have, I think Thomas Gordon could have been as well.
I thought if there was going to be one Gordon, it was going to be Thomas.
Yeah, exactly, right?
I think on the video they wrote out Thomas Gordon when they were showing Cam Gordon. There's just maybe a Freudian slip there. They don't really have much, most of the guys on the defense, or the 3 captains on the defense, don't really have too much game experience. Avery played, but is he going to get playing time this year? It's a little bit unclear. Gordon will play, but he's, like you said, switched around from position to position. Jake Ryan's going to miss half the year. So it's just a little bit unorthodox, I think, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Lewan was the obvious choice.
The Devin Gardner thing, and I come back to that too, Nick, because it just seemed like they've been praising him and praising his leadership, and I'd really like to see the ballots. I'd like to see how close he came, because was it a matter of him, missing by a lot? Was it just a little bit? Did the coaches impact this at all? Did the coaches say, hey, we want it to be, do they have their hands on this a little bit? Do they? Maybe as a motivation to Devin, you haven't arrived yet. You still have to go out there and improve something, and still have to go out there and lead by example without, we've heard that this guy has extreme confidence, but maybe the confidence gets up there a little bit too high and they need to bring him down a little bit. Maybe this is a way to do that.
Maybe, I don't know. I hate to read too much into this. I always every year we do this, right? We read too much into this. But that is an interesting point. Maybe this is something where we say, Devin had all summer, he had the spotlight, it was all this, that, and the other. Other guys need to be involved as well. Maybe that was it. Maybe they say other guys need to have a role. Maybe somebody else needs to step up and do something. But he's going to lead anyway. It's his huddle, so he's not going to go to the coin.
Well, and he did so many of these camps. He was traveling around in the off season. Maybe we don't know. Maybe he missed some team workouts, some team bonding, different things like that. Who knows if that were something that played into it? Maybe that he was doing all this stuff on his own, and that could have been an issue. Who really knows? We don't, but. That could be something that they looked at, maybe. And
at the end of the day, if this is who the team voted, and this is who the team respects, and this is who they want them to be their leaders, then, we can sit here and talk about it all day, but those guys are in that locker room every single day. They're in their workouts. They know who they can count on. and they're going to go to count on Devin Gardner, as you said. I mean, so let's just kind of be done with it. Those are the captains.
Well, we can never be done with anything.
Absolutely, absolutely not. Well, it looks like our breakfast has arrived. Everybody got smart except for our cameraman. Everybody else ordered the French toast. We'll enjoy and then we'll talk some more. Well, we just got done talking about Devin Gardner and the fact that he's not a captain, but there's a lot of hype about Devin and his season that he could have, and people who are already comparing him to some of the greats that have ever played quarterback in Michigan. You know, is he going to have a Tom Brady-esque year? Is he going to be, you know, Chad Henne as a true freshman when he threw for 25 touchdowns, or Elvis Gerbach, Jim Harbaugh, Drew Henson? I mean, there's no comparison that can't be made right now, and certainly I think he's going to have a good year. But let's throw out a couple of numbers. Will Devin Gardner throw for 3,000 yards this year? Over under?
Oh boy. Yeah, I'm gonna go over. I think I'm gonna go over barely. Because I'm going to take into account a bowl game and maybe playing in Indianapolis. So I'm going to just cheat and say over by a slight amount. I think that he's going to be in better positions to throw the football than Denard ever was. I think just with this offense and this situation, he's not going to have to throw it 50 times a game, but it's not going to be a 12-pass game. You know, I think that he's going to be in position to throw for 250 a game, somewhere in there, 225. Have nice, you know, I mean, regardless of who steps up the receiver, they still do have weapons. They have the tight ends. They have, you know, the little receivers, Gallon and Julio. I think it's realistic. I think it'd be close though. I wouldn't go like blowing it out of the water. So I'll cheat and say barely over.
Yeah, I would go over just a little bit, and I think that in large part because we're going to see how the running game, I guess, finds its groove early in the season. We don't know how the interior of the offensive line is going to shake out. Are they going to be able to get a push? And I think in 2012 what we saw is the passing game with Devin and what he was able to do down the field. That opened up the running game a little bit, at least towards the end of the season. You saw Denard being able to run and find a few holes. So I'll go over like Nick just a little bit.
I'm going to take the opposite view. I'm going to go under. If you look at it, he's got to pass for over 250 yards a game. It's a lot of yards. Yeah. And I think Michigan's going to be running the ball a lot. I think they're trying to get back to that power running game. I just think that he's going to have a very good year. I just don't see him putting up those type of numbers every single game, which is, you know, he's got to be consistent and pretty darn good too.
Well, I'd say the one thing, if you go back and look at Al Borges' career, once he's kind of had his offense in play, look at the numbers that Ryan Lindley put up, look at the numbers that Jason Campbell put up at Auburn, and that Cade McDowell put up at UCLA, and all those guys threw for 3,000 yards at some point. So I think we're going to see a downfield passing attack that, you know, maybe they're not chipping away slowly at 250 yards, but he has 2 or 3 real big plays a game that takes him over that point. And I think, I'm with you guys, I think he gets to 3,000 yards. You know, it doesn't run away with it. It's not like 3,700 or something like that, but 3,100 or 3,200, right in that range, especially, as you said, Nick, if they play in the Big Ten Championship game, then they have their bowl game. That's 2 extra games, and now that number comes down. It doesn't have to be 250, it could be 240 or 238 or whatever the math is. But how about touchdowns? 22 touchdowns if I set the over-under there for Devin Gardner.
We talking passing touchdowns?
Yeah, passing touchdowns. Passing touchdowns.
I'd be like a hypocrite here if I didn't say over, right? Because of the 3,000. You know, I'm going to say under. And I'm going to say under because I think, to Zach's point, that this is going to be more of a running team as well. So I think some of these touchdowns, if we're getting into the, you know, into the red zone, into the 5 yards out, whatever, I think that some of those are going to be run. And he's going to run too in that area. I think we saw that last year where, you know, he had the 18 combined touchdowns in that 5-game stretch, and 7 of them were on the ground. So Devin will run the ball. He'll poach his own passing touchdowns a little bit with his own feet. So I'll go under on that one on the touchdown category.
I was going to go under. I think I'm leaning towards over on this one because he put up, I think he had 11 passing touchdowns in just 5 games last year, and that was against, I mean, that was really the better part of Michigan's schedule at that point. Obviously the rushing touchdowns for him is going to take away from that, and then obviously the rushing touchdowns for the running backs, because I know they're going to want to try and pound it in every single opportunity they get. I'll go over though, but not by a lot. I don't think he's going to throw 25. He doesn't have Braylon Edwards.
I'm going over as well.
Wait, he has Jeremy Gallon.
Yeah, I forgot.
Not the same.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about Chad Henne. That's why he was so good his freshman year. He had Braylon Edwards. I think he's going to go over. Slightly. I guess I'm also contradicting myself. But I think him and Funchess could connect pretty well there with big target in Funchess in the end zone. And he did have 11 touchdowns in 5 games, 11 passing touchdowns. I think he's going to go over by a little bit.
I think he's going to go over. I think he's going to set the Michigan single-season record. Ooh. The Michigan single-season record is 25 right now. Chad Henne had it in 2004, and I want to say Elvis Gerbach had it. or maybe someone can correct me, but 25 touchdowns is a single season record. I think he goes over that slightly. I think when they get to the red zone, you know, we'll have to see about this offensive line and about how they use their running backs. If Derek Green gets healthy and he can be a guy that they use in short yard situations, or if Fitzgerald Toussaint can punch it in from 2 or 3 yards out, I think what you're going to see a lot is I think you're going to see a lot of the fade into the corner to Devin Funchess. And I think those are going to boost some of Devin Gardner's touchdown numbers. So, well, let's talk running backs. Fitzgerald Toussaint looks like he is the clear-cut #1 running back. The gulf between him and maybe the #2 is a little bit wider than we anticipated it was going to be when camp started. So let's not say 1,000 yards, because if a #1 running back usually gets 1,000, let's go 1,200 yards.
I'm gonna go under, and I think I'm gonna go under 1,200 because I think my guess on what'll happen here is that he's gonna be your guy for the first 5-6 weeks of the season, and they're gonna wear him. I mean, they're gonna pound him and let these other young guys kind of get their feet under him. I think though, by November, you're gonna need the Derek Greens and maybe Rawls and maybe even a Davion Smith. I'm not sure the combination, but I think they're going to need extra people in there, and that's going to take away a little bit from Fitz. So you're not just wearing him out every game all year long. I think you ride him early until the young guys kind of get their footing, and at that point I think it becomes spread out. I don't think Devin's going to run for a ton of yards. It's not Denard, but I think another running back will emerge and kind of split some of that with Fitz. I think we'll go over 1,000. I don't think we'll hit 1,200.
Yeah, I'll go under just because I think carries are going to get spread around a little more as the season goes on. I agree with you. And I think a couple of years ago when he ran for 1,000 yards, a lot of that was because of Denard. I mean, they were really, you know, teams were really keying on Denard, and that really opened things up for Fitz, which he has great vision. He really does have good cutback ability and different things like that, but I would definitely go under 1,200. I think he gets to 1,000, but I would go under 1,200.
I say under 1,200. I'm not positive he's going to get to 1,000. I think last year Michigan running backs combined had less than 1,000 yards, and part of that was because of Denard. But Denard
was around 800.
Yeah, it was 800 or 900 something.
It wasn't really bad.
It was not good, and I think the line could be better this year. But they are replacing the entire interior, and it takes a little while to get that chemistry going. And you might be getting that chemistry going against some of the worst teams on your schedule, where Fitz could potentially put up the biggest stats. I also think he's going to split some carries later on in the year with guys like Derek Green. So I think he's going to go under. I would be surprised if he got to 1,000.
I don't want to jump you, Mike, but just to add, he said earlier about Darbo, we don't know what we lost because he never had a catch. That's kind of the same thing we see with the offensive line. Everyone's like, well, they're going to be better with these redshirt freshmen and guys who have never played. We don't really know that yet. And we got to find that out Saturday. We got to find that out against Notre Dame. We'll see how that progresses too.
Absolutely. If it's the same type of production that we saw a year ago, then all of these stats change, because there's no way Fitzgerald runs for 1,000 yards because the offensive line is just not opening up the holes. You know, and you could put Derek Green in there, you could put Tyrone Wheatley in there, and he's not going to get 1,000 yards if they're not a better line than they were a year ago.
I don't know how it could get worse.
I'm going to take the push. I'm going to say he gets right at 1,200 yards. So I'm cheating a little bit. I just think the first, you know, as you guys said, I mean, it's going to take a little while for someone else to carve out a niche. And, you know, Thomas Rawls, Drake Johnson, Justice Hayes, I think those guys are really niche backs. I don't think they're going to be the guy that demands 15 carries at any point this season. Maybe it's Davion Smith, maybe it's Derek Green once he gets that ankle healthy, can get himself back in shape, but I don't think we're going to see Derek Green be an impact player until October at the earliest. But if he becomes that player down the road, then he starts eating away at Fitzgerald Toussaint's carries. And so I'm going to say 1,200 yards push. Looking at the defensive side of the ball, you know, let's talk. There's so much emphasis about Frank Clark and about rushing the passer, getting after it. Does someone, and is that person Frank Clark, does someone get to double digits, 10 sacks for an individual this year?
No, I don't think so. I just don't. You know, obviously the best candidate would be Frank Clark, but Frank had his chance last year to break out and turn a corner. Not to say that he can't this year, but he never did. And more than that, the defensive line in general has just been, I mean, they've done a terrific job of turning that defense around in 2 years, but those sack numbers are embarrassing. I mean, they are so low. 10 sacks for one guy. They got to get 10 as a group first before I'm going to go and say that 10 is 10 for one, but I don't see that happening.
I think I need to see more.
Yeah,
you know, you hear about his body, you know, his transformation, everything like that, and yeah, he can do a lot of different things, but I want to see how they use him. I want to see how teams block him. Who knows if they buy into the hype too and they're doubling him or doing different things to deter him. I mean, it could be, you know, a situation where you have a lot of guys that have 3 or 4 sacks, and they spread it out a little bit. But again, we got to see it. I like what you said. You know, we haven't seen the production, so I want to see that first. Then be like, okay, yeah, maybe he can't get that. So I'll change my answer.
Zach, if it's not Frank Clark that leads his team in sacks, who is it?
That's an interesting question. You know, they don't really have a big pass rusher besides Frank Clark. I mean, they have Taco Charlton, but and even that, right. And he has problems with consistency. You look at Taco Charlton, could be their best pass rusher, but he's probably a couple years away from really making a big impact every play. Other than that, is Keith Heitzman going to do it? I think he had maybe 1 sack last year. Coming off the other end, Quentin Washington up the middle. I really don't see too many opportunities for other guys to get sacks.
I think the thing that, when we talked about this earlier about Frank Clark, that's interesting is the fact that they are going to move him around a lot. So they're going to give him a lot of opportunities to exploit, mismatches, whether it's in the interior going against a center or a guard or coming out on the outside. So I think he's going to have an opportunity. But talking about him, when we were in Chicago for the Big Ten Media Day, I talked to a couple opposing players anonymously. I don't want to get them in trouble. And I was struck by one of the comments, and I'll let the cat out of the bag. I mean, it was an Ohio State guy, and he said that guy against us was an animal. He had a huge hit on Braxton Miller, a big sack. I think he had 2 tackles for loss. And if that guy shows up every week, no one's going to be able to block him. But that guy didn't show up every week last year. That guy showed up for that game, in the Iowa game, and the Northwestern game. But against South Carolina, we didn't see him. Yeah. So if Michigan needs consistency out of Frank Clark, they need consistency out of Mario Ojemudia and Andre Pipkins and all these guys. And if that happens, maybe 10 sacks is within reach. But if it doesn't happen,
you're going to be in trouble.
They're going to spread that around. Last over/under, and then we'll move on to our next segment. Jake Ryan. There's all this talk about he's progressing faster and faster and faster. And Brady Hoke back in the spring, when he first told us that he thought he'd be back in November, we were all, wow, could this kid really return from an ACL injury in November? And now, a couple weeks ago in Chicago, he said October. This kid's going to be back in October. And there's he's moving faster and faster. Do we see him for the Big Ten opener that first weekend of October? Do we see him before that?
No, I don't think I honestly don't think you'll see him in a game maybe until November, because if you look at the way the schedule, and it's going to depend on how the season's going, but if their schedule is obviously backloaded, the front part of it, if you get through Notre Dame and that Penn State game, it's not that difficult. So are you going to rush him back in there to play Indiana? I wouldn't. You got Michigan State the first weekend of November, so maybe, and then that's after a bye. So maybe you say, let's just wait, let's let him practice, do all the things he needs to do. Let's wait, get him out here, get him fresh for the start of that really difficult stretch into November. If he comes back the first weekend of October or whatever, then he's just a freak of nature, and I don't know what else to say. But I think they'll be more cautious and maybe just pocket him until they really need him. That's kind of my guess. Anyway.
Well, he is very unorthodox, apparently,
yeah.
So maybe he will have an unorthodox return. I don't know what his impact will be, but I don't envision him. I think the schedule sets up perfect. I think it's October 22nd, 23rd, something like that, and then there's 2 weeks, before the Michigan State game. That would be, in my opinion, the best time for him to return against the Michigan State team, who, we'll see what happens with their quarterback situation. And do you want to really show them something the week before, a couple weeks before you play them on film? Who knows? I think that's a good landing point for when he comes back, and we'll see how he can impact the defense.
If he is healthy, say he's medically cleared, he's ready to go in October, how much will depend on what Cam Gordon and Brendan Byer are already doing at that same position?
Well, you mentioned before who's going to get the most sacks. If it's not Frank Clark, it could be Jake Ryan if he was healthy all year. I think, if Cam Gordon or Brendan Byer they would have to play amazingly to replicate even close to what Jake Ryan did last year. Here's the most explosive player. Here's the biggest playmaker on defense. He could disrupt. You could take on a blocker and throw blockers off and just disrupt the screen by himself. He could do things that people on the defense just can't do innately. So I think, unless Cam Gordon and Brendan Byer are playing out of their minds, and if Jake Ryan really isn't in shape yet, then they could get some snaps. But other than that, Jake Ryan's the guy at Sam.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think we keep on hearing more and more about it, and you wonder if this guy, Adrian Peterson came back from his ACL injury in the fastest time that's ever been recorded medically. And I think if Jake Ryan were to come back in October, he would beat Adrian Peterson's time, which just blows your mind. So it'll be something to keep an eye on. And I think there's a possibility he comes back for that Penn State game, just especially if Penn State is playing really well. You look at Penn State's schedule, they could be 5-0 at that point. And if Cam Gordon and Brendan Byer are not really doing a job at Sam, and Jake Ryan is cleared and he wants to play, maybe he comes back for that game. But I think you guys are right. I mean, why risk it when you don't have to? Let them come back for that crucial 5-game stretch in November. All right, gentlemen, we talked over-under, we talked captains, we talked surprises coming out of camp. Let's get to the meat of it. Michigan's record this season. Are they going to be in the Big Ten title game? Are they going to the Rose Bowl? Who are they beating? Who are they losing to? Start with you, Nick. What is your prediction for the season?
I wrote down 10-2. I had them at 10 wins, 2 losses. The 2 losses I wrote down were at Michigan State, at Northwestern. So by that means they beat Ohio State. But by that logic, I don't think that puts them in the Big Ten title game. It's 2 division losses. So I think they miss it. I just think that road game at East Lansing always means so much to Mark D'Antonio and those guys. Not that it doesn't mean anything to Michigan. I don't want to ever get into that ridiculous discussion. But I just think it means the world to them. And that game, they have not been good on the road under Hogue. That's a tough one. And the Northwestern almost beat them last year here. So I think that's a trip up as well. In the Ohio State game, I thought Michigan was much closer than people wanted to ever admit last year. I mean, 26-21 of it was final score, and Denard couldn't throw, and Dylan was hurt. So, no reasons to not think they could win that at home. But the 2 division losses, I think, keeps them out of that Big Ten title game.
I said 10-2 as well. I think Michigan State gets them. I think Ohio State gets them. But I mean, an appearance in the Big Ten championship would mean a lot. I think if you don't get there, it's a disappointing season for Michigan. We'll see how it shakes out with who else in the division loses and if they're able to get to the Big Ten title game. But Michigan State, I mean, people, they want to talk about the quarterback situation. If they can find any semblance of an offense, their defense is good enough to get them over the hump.
And that schedule is weak enough.
Big Ten's not. For one more year, they have that defense. For at least one more year, they really have a bear. And I think they know that, right? They know the window has to be right now. Yep. That's important to them.
Well, if 6-2 in the Big Ten, I don't think gets them to the Big Ten title game because of the fact that because Michigan State's schedule is the way that it is, where their cross-division rivals are all really easy. It's Illinois, it's Purdue, and I believe it's Indiana. And so they're not going to, I mean, they get Nebraska, Michigan, and Northwestern, but if they beat Michigan and even lose those other 2, they're going to have the head-to-head against Michigan. So if they go 6-2, if Michigan goes 6-2, they're not going to play in Indianapolis. Zach, what is your prediction?
I think if you look at it, I think 10-2 also. If you look at it, they got 4 really tough games, and that's Notre Dame at home, Nebraska at home, Michigan State away, and Ohio State at home. I think you could split, maybe go 3-1 in those games just because you got 3 games at home. But if you split that, go 2-2, and then 2, I don't know if you call them trap games, but really tough games on the road in Penn State, Northwestern. Iowa could be a tough game too, but I think they could go 3-1 in those tough stretches. I don't know which games they're going to lose, but I think if they could go 3-1 or split those and then maybe lose one of the tough games on the road, I could see 10-2 and then see how the division shakes out with Nebraska and Michigan State.
Well, I've got them at, man, I sound like a broken record, but I've got them at 10-2. But my losses are a little bit different. I actually have them losing to Notre Dame the second week of the year. I know there's going to be a lot of excitement for that game, the night game. When you look at it, Notre Dame's strength is that front 7. They lose Monte Teo, but they're still really, really good up front. And what is Michigan's? What are we talking about? The interior of the offensive line. And if that interior of the offensive line is not significantly better, they're going to have a very tough time against Notre Dame in that second week of the year. Moving the football on the ground, they're going to have a tough time protecting Bogenschutz. And I think that's the matchup that ultimately just costs Michigan just enough. It's going to be a low scoring. I don't think it's going to be 28-24 or something like that, but it could be a 17-14 that goes Notre Dame's way. The other thing too is that Michigan fans, I mean, I don't know about the ones that you come in contact with, but everybody talks about Tommy Rees, a bum, and Tommy Rees is that. Tommy Rees put them in position to win that game 2 years ago, and then last year he's the one that had the touchdown for them. So let's not make it out to be like this guy is a bum that is so far over his head. I mean, he's still a good quarterback. Is he as mobile as Everett Golson was? No, but I like Notre Dame's chances in that game. And then I look at that 3-game stretch, just as you guys did. Michigan State, Nebraska, Northwestern. They dropped one of those 3. I think they come out of the bye. I know what you're saying about Michigan State, and this is what Michigan fans have to realize is that they think Michigan State's just going to go away at some point.
No,
but as long as Mark D'Antonio is there, even if State somehow falls to 6-6, they're going to play Michigan with everything that they have. So that is never going to be an easy game on Michigan's schedule as long as D'Antonio is there. So, but I think Michigan comes off the bye. Jake Ryan returns, has all the emotion, wants to beat them, takes care of business. Then the Nebraska week, the next game is revenge for whatever we saw take place last year. But Northwestern's one that I think, then you got 2 emotional games, you're going over there, natural letdown. I think that's one that gets them in. But at that point, they're 10-2, 7-1 in the Big Ten, and they do go to Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship. Sound fair?
That would do it.
I think so.
All right, well, gentlemen, thanks for joining us at Frank's Diner on Maynard. We're going to be here every Monday, 10 a.m., having the best French toast in Ann Arbor and talking Michigan football.